Welcome, friends of the Greasy Shop Rag. Today we're going to take a look at an Echo CS680 chainsaw. Customer complaint is that it won't start. So I had previously diagnosed this saw as needing an ignition module, and now we're going to put that module in. In order to do that, we need to tear a few things apart to gain access to the module. One of them is the air filter so that we can get that top cylinder cover off. Pretty standard stuff here. We're going to loosen up a bunch of screws to get that cylinder cover off. 3 of them so far. Here's the 4th. Here's a 5th. Well, they didn't want that cover falling off, did they? The only reason I say that is I'm used to working on a lot of Husqvarnas that only use 3 screws. So what are we doing here? Oh yeah, that anti-vibe mount on the handle, that kind of passes right through that cover. So we're going to have to get this 6th screw out of the way. Flex the handle over to one side, and then we can just kind of pop that cover out of there. See? Pop. It's out of there. Alright, now we're going to pop this. We're popping a lot of stuff today. We're going to pop that starter off of there. I mean, as far as starters go, that's a big piece of plastic right there. I mean, they don't get much bigger than that until you get into a concrete saw. Now, this ignition module isn't typical. The first thing is, it's got a screw holding the kill wire onto it. You know, a lot of times you just have a spade connector. And when you're loosening that screw, I like to use a slotted screwdriver to break it loose and then the Phillips to spin it out. That works for me. So we're going to get this fan shroud out of the way and then loosen the screws on that ignition module. Now, I don't do 680 Echo ignition modules very often. And in fact, if I've ever done one before, I forgot that this thing has got a weird shape to it. And it doesn't just lift out of here. If you look at the one on the bench, you can see that a good portion of that module kind of got an L shape and it goes underneath the flywheel. So if that can be lifted out of there and you know how, let me know. Otherwise, I'm just going to keep pulling flywheels off and taking it apart that way. So the Q-tips are just to hold them starter pawls out of place so I don't accidentally whack them with a hammer and bend them. I'm going to take a crowfoot bar. Just put a little pressure underneath that flywheel, nothing crazy. Get a nice square whack on the end of that nut, which I brought up flush with the end of the crankshaft. A couple of pops and it came loose. Lost the Q-tip in the engine somewhere though. Alright, a little bit of housework here, clean things up. You can see that step in that ignition coil really good there. Looks like we ordered the right one. At least it's the right shape. Echo sends them without a boot on the end, or the terminal. So I got to salvage that from the old module. And I found that getting a little bit of oil underneath that boot to make it slide off of there really makes a difference. Just kind of lay our new module in place. Put this protective sleeve over the high tension lead. Orient where the hole has got to be in that lead, so I get the terminal facing the spark plug. And then we got a fancy pliers here that's got a pin for piercing that wire. There's a stop on that pliers, so you end up getting the right depth every time. And our boot has already got a bunch of oil in it, so we should be able to push it right over the end of this terminal. And I probably could get it on there all the way if my hands weren't also already full of oil. So we got to just kind of hold it with the pliers a little bit with one hand and then push it on there. There we go. Terminal looks like it's centered inside the boot. We should be good. Alright, we're going to put a couple of screws in this module just to locate it. And in fact, we're going to snug that module down at what would be maximum air gap with the flywheel. So we're pushing it toward the bar and then snugging it down. That'll give us some room to get our feeler gauge in there. Drop the flywheel in place, get the keyway lined up, which it isn't yet. There we go. Now we're getting that module pushed all the way back. And then we'll run our nut down on the flywheel. Torque spec is about that much. So this stepped ignition module is a real pain in the butt. I tried getting my feeler gauge in from the bottom, then I ended up putting it in from the top, and I'm kind of working it in there with a screwdriver on one end and pushing it on the other end. This is another one of those scenarios where if you know a better way, I'm all ears. You know, I'd be surprised if I ever had to do one of these again. This is a pretty reliable module in this saw. So we get the feeler gauge in place. Then we let the screws loose and allow the magnet to draw the module up snug to the feeler gauge. Then we tighten the screws down, and remove our gauge. Now our fan shroud is in place, and we'll have to run a screw in through our kill wire. Get that bolted down. We're going to tighten it with the slotted screwdriver. Kind of trying to figure out my routing for this lead. There's really not a spot designated for it. There's a weird slot in the top of the starter that it'll pass through, but there's not really a holder or anything for that wire. You can see there the starter's rocking on that wire, so it's not right. The wire looks like it's passing behind the starter pretty decent. You know, I think that's all. We're gonna see if this thing runs. If it fires up, then we are successful. So that's all I got for you on an Echo CS680 chainsaw ignition module swap. Thanks for watching. Later.